Let's talk about the Pixel 8 devices, the 8 and the 8 Pro. So both these devices have a relatively unique feature in the sense that their face biometrics are secure enough to allow you to access like very secure apps. So banking apps, NFC payments, password apps. Those are typically locked out on Android phones with face biometrics. You have to use your fingerprint or a pattern to get into that. But on this phone, it can do it. Now, the only other phone in existence in the Android space that has ever had this level of like class 3 super secure face biometrics has been the Pixel 4 with its radar technology, the SOLI sensor. But here, Google is doing it on the Pixel 8 and the 8 Pro using just the regular front-facing camera and the machine learning in Google's new Tensor G3 chip. And from my testing, my very crude testing, it works really well. So I printed this out last week. It's a very flattering photo of myself. But on a lot of Android phones, particularly Chinese phones, this can bypass face biometrics. It's pretty crude, but occasionally it can work. Now, on Pixel's devices last year, this would occur, like it could crack through very rarely, like probably 1 in every 20 attempts. It's not an issue, right? But this picture here, this is comical. You're gonna get a good laugh out of this. So Asus sent me this for like testing a 3D laptop thing. I needed some face that could move around, but this is surprisingly good at cracking phones. This will bust into my Pixel 7 Pro readily. Even if I use like a brand new like face biometric on the Pixel 7 Pro and I pull this thing out, this is a super old photo. For whatever reason, it just works. Not every single time, but like 50% of the time, which is completely unusable. But this dude cannot crack the Pixel 8 Pro. I tried a lot. I really wanted it to just bust through, but the Pixel 8 devices are just too strong for this cutout of my face. A couple thoughts though. First, it doesn't work well in lower light conditions. So I was in a parking garage underground and I was trying to use Google Wallet to access, like it couldn't unlock with my face. I had to use my fingerprint there. Secondly, I don't think this technology is as good as where Google wants it to be right now, because they kind of barely mentioned this during the presentation. I feel like if Google had a first on this, like the way they talked about it during the SOLI time when Pixel 4 had it, they're like, they could be like, we're the only phone right now that does it. But they kind of like swept it under the rug. And I have a feeling that not me, but some other journalist or YouTuber is gonna figure out a way to crack this class 3 security using something, because it's just using camera hardware that's very basic. There's no infrared sensors or lenses, it's just a regular camera. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about that seems a little underbaked is the temperature sensor on the back of this device. So the Pixel 8 Pro, and only the Pro, has the ability to use the temperature sensor back here to measure the temperature of an object. The way they use it is that you launch the app, and then once you're in the app, you choose a material from a list of options. And so they have things like water or glass or wood. There's a whole bunch of different materials. We're going with wood here because I believe my table is made of wood. And then once you've made that selection, you just tap it right in the middle, and then it'll give you very quickly a measure of that temperature. I have a couple issues with this. First, the very first time you open up this app, there's a message stating that this app is not intended to be used for measuring body temperature. Now, when I saw that, I was like, what? Are you kidding? Like, that would be the #1 reason why I would want something like this. Like, during the presentation when they announced this, I thought, hey, that could be really useful. I have 2 kids and I'm sending them to school and one of them feels warm. I'd be like, do they have a fever? I can check off of my phone. That would be sick. But you can't do that. But the extra weird thing is that months ago, when there were leaks of this feature on the Pixel 8 Pro, there was this Google Pixel Tips video that was floating around where it seemed like they were actually going to implement this feature where you could use this temperature sensor and measure your body on your forehead and get a body temperature. Now, I imagine there's some kind of legality around this where if there's some kind of inconsistency with that number, or like let's say it was an incorrect reading and you made some decision based off that reading, maybe Google would be liable and they didn't want that. Now, in its current iteration, if you go through the kind of material selections, there isn't anything that says like body. The closest thing would be food and organics. Like, I guess I'm reasonably organic, so if I was gonna try to measure my body temperature, I'd go with that. And if I go with organics and I bring it to my body, or like my forehead, if we can just demo real quick here. I'm gonna go to my forehead and I tap it. 34.4, like that's not even close. My body temperature is probably like 36, 37. Like this is at least 3 degrees off right now. So yeah, at this stage, What are you really measuring temperatures of using what they have? I don't know. Now, the Pixel 8 Pro and the Pixel 8 both have awesome camera systems this year. The dynamic range on the 8 Pro is particularly good, and because they're Pixel devices, the low light photography with night sight looks awesome. But for the most part, the still cameras are really similar to the Pixel 7 and Pixel 7 Pro from last year. Now, there are a few features that are unique to this year's devices. The first one being the best take feature. So the way this works is that you take a bunch of photos of a group of people in the camera app, and then you pull those photos up in the Photos app. And within there, you'll find a tool called Best Take. And what it does is it kind of takes that photo, it takes the other photos you took around that same shot, and it'll pick out the faces in those shots and allow you to select between the different takes of those photos to be able to create the best take. And at first glance, these are surprisingly good. You actually have to look quite closely to pick up on the visual artifacts and stuff. Now, sometimes, even with a cluster of photos that seemingly should work with this best take feature, just don't. And I don't know if it's something that'll get fixed over time, but it's very good in its current iteration already. The other new feature, called Pro Mode, is only available on the 8 Pro, and this gives you just a more fine-tuned control on the shot. You can control ISO and color and focus. The focus control in particular is really neat. It gives you focus lines like you'd see on some kind of high-end prosumer devices, and it's neat to see it here as well. Now, during the presentation last week, there were a few features that they talked about for a pretty good amount of time. First was video boost, and secondly was night sight, and they supposedly bring better color, more even lighting, noise reduction, better image stabilization, a lot of cool features, but they're just not available to test on this device yet, which is super weird. Like, they launched it, they talked about it, they made a commercial for it, but we can't even test it on these review devices. So that's a little bit disappointing. But the three features I talked about, so video boost, night sight video, as well as Pro Mode, were supposedly just for the Pixel 8 Pro, not for the regular Pixel 8. But on Twitter, I saw that a few people already have these apps working on older Pixel devices, including like the regular Pixel 6. So something tells me this whole thing is just software locked. Now, in terms of thermals and performance, the Pixel 8 Pro has very similar thermals to last year's Pixel 7 Pro. When you're going full blast in Genshin, it makes the device hit this kind of thermal wall pretty much at the same time as last year's device. But battery life, I'm running the same tests as I did last year, and for whatever reason, I'm actually getting slightly worse battery life on the Pixel 8 Pro this year. The moment they put their Tensor chips into these phones, like Pixel 6 and 7 and 8, I feel like the battery life has been pretty much the same for the past 3 years, at least on my tests. The 7 years of operating system support. I talked about this briefly previously. I think it's really cool. The idea is great, but I think it's just a little overambitious for them. Either they pull the plug a little early, or I think the more realistic option is that I think they're going to give these like really detuned versions, or just like gimped versions of Android, of like the new Android, on like year 6 and 7. That's my guess. So I wouldn't purchase this phone based on the promise of long-term updates. It's a nice bonus if it happens, though. So last thing, pricing. So I think for $100 extra this year, I don't feel like the Pixel 8 really got anything out of that extra $100. I think that Google is going to use that $100 price increase as like a kind of bargaining chip. When things go on sale, they can have it on like a bigger sale. But the Pixel 8 Pro, maybe it warrants that extra money, like the temperature sensor, which I wish did more at this point in time. But maybe that could warrant. But here's the deal. The Pixel devices, they're my favorite Android phones. The camera system, awesome. It's always awesome. And then the clean software, that has so much value to me. So yeah, great phones. I just wish the features did more right now. Okay.